you have been trying to feel less. Maybe it wasn't consciously, and maybe it was not a declared strategy that you put out there, but look at the actual shape of your days that you go through. Look at the scrolling, look at the noise, look at the constant low-level consumption of content that requires nothing from you and leaves nothing with you. And what you will find underneath all of that is a person who has become so distant and so skilled at not sitting with a difficult feeling. Someone who has built an entire architecture of distraction which is so refined that discomfort rarely gets more than a mere 3 or 4 seconds in their life of uninterrupted attention before something else moves in to replace it. And the cost of that, which is the specific and serious and largely unacknowledged cost, is that you are becoming hollow in a way that comfort will never be able to fix. Because the same exact capacity which allows you to feel pain is the exact same capacity which allows you to feel anything at all. If you dull one of them, you will dull both. And the avoidment of suffering is not the achievement of peace, but instead the slow erosion of depth. Now, Fyodor Dostoevsky, one of the most influential writers, philosophers, whatever you want to label him as, knew this. And he knew this not as theory, but instead as a biography, through his life. Now, Dostoevsky was arrested at 27 years old for political dissidence, and he was then sentenced to death and stood in front of a real firing squad. Like a genuine group of people with guns aiming at him. That was December in 1849. He heard the command, the order given to exterminate him, and he waited to die. The execution, however, was a staged performance, and it was a psychological torture on his mind designed by the Tsar of Russia at that time, Nicholas I. The order was then commuted at the last exact moment. Dostoevsky was then sent to a Siberian labor camp for 4 years instead of being executed on the spot. When he came back as a completely different person, or so I've been told. He was not broken, but instead transformed, and the experience of standing at the absolute edge of existence, the literal edge of death, of having every single thing in your life reduced to a single fact of being alive, produced inside him a relationship to suffering that could never ever be theorized into existence. It has to be lived, and 99% of people will never live that feeling. However, Dostoevsky lived that feeling at such a depth that most people will never even comprehend of how insane it is to genuinely be on this close, the verge of death. Now, what emerged from that suffering was the book Crime and Punishment. It was also the book The Idiot, and
The Brothers Karamazov.
The Brothers Karamazov.
Brothers Karamazov is the greatest book ever written.
The Brothers Karamazov, which I'm currently reading. The Devils, maybe even, and a body of work which was so psychologically precise that Freud said that Dostoevsky had taught him more about the human interior than any other psychology combined. The suffering was not incidental to the work. Instead, the suffering was the source of it. In his book, my favorite book of his so far, The Brothers Karamazov, Father Zosima tells Alyosha, which is one of the brothers, that love in action is a harsh and dreadful thing compared to love in the dreams. That the person who loves someone else in their dreams, someone who imagines themselves generously and compassionate and capable of great feeling, often cannot tolerate the reality of another person's actual suffering up close, nor can they actually accept it as real. That real love, that close depth, that real, actual, genuine human connection, that connection with someone else, requires the willingness of being inside difficulty without flinching from the difficulty. Dostoevsky was not writing about love as a sentiment. He was writing about the actual capacity to remain present inside of pain, your own pain as well as other people's pain, without any sort of reflexive reach to, run away or something that can make that pain stop for you. Now, that capacity is not a natural thing that comes with you as a human when you are born. Instead, it is developed, and it's developed over suffering. It's developed specifically through the experience of suffering that has not been escaped, and that has not been managed or immediately soothed into something more comfortable. The person who has spent so many years, countless years, successfully avoiding difficulty will never ever arrive at peace. They will arrive at a specific kind of numbness that may look like stability from the outside and may feel like absence from the inside. It's quite polarizing, but that's just the truth. They have protected themselves from the lows so effectively that the highs themselves had quietly disappeared too without them ever noticing. They may feel fine, maybe they are fine, comprehensively and thoroughly and unarguably fine. That is, maybe they could say that for themselves. But they're also completely unreachable for anything that matters to them. Now, Dostoevsky had written inside that prison camp. He wrote epileptic, he wrote in debt, he wrote grievingly, and he wrote politically persecuted, compulsively gambling away all of his money that he didn't even have. He wrote because writing was the only way he knew how to metabolize what was happening to him, the suffering that he was suffering from extensively. It was to take the raw material of suffering and then to turn it into something that could actually be given to another person. Now, you are the person who has been running away from the raw material and instead focusing on the refined version. Not because you're a weak person, because again, you don't have to be weak to want to avoid suffering. Of course not. It's a human instinct to avoid it. But instead, it's simply because of the fact that the modern world has made running so easy. It's made it the actual outcome that most people default towards. It is so frictionless and it's so immediate and it's so available that the alternative, which is sitting with that difficulty and letting it go where it needs to go throughout your body and allowing it to do what suffering does to a person who does not escape it, requires a deliberate and a genuine choice to try and sit through that, and that most people will never ever make. Now, Dostoevsky did not have that choice. He was sat in front of that firing squad and the firing squad removed that choice from him. You instead do have the choice, and take it from Dostoevsky, one of the most, genuinely one of the best writers I've ever read. His work was fueled by not rage, but instead just from suffering. So now, again, I'm going to tell you that you do have that choice, and the question which is sitting inside of you right now, the one that avoidance has been keeping quiet for so long, maybe write down for once. Just take a journal and start writing for one time. Just think about that question I asked you. I'll make it simpler. Genuinely, the whole question is literally, what has avoiding cost you, and what can changing the avoidance bring into your life?